Hello, friends. So today we're going to go over a workflow for getting a little bit more out of our GIS data. So we're going to go through two basic operations. The first is filtering our data so we can focus on specific attributes of the data that we have or specific categories of data that we've downloaded. And then the second is actually to join data or to look at the relationships between two data sets. This tutorial was created by Andrea Hansen for the Digital Practices 3 class, so shout out to Andrea for actually developing this tutorial. I'm just sort of turning it into a video. So I have a map opened up here of Charlottesville. This is some Charlottesville data that I got from the Charlottesville City website. A lot of municipalities and cities have GIS data readily available on their websites, so you just have to do some Googling to find them. And so I have a parcel boundary area here. I have this historic district, our roads, and then some bike lanes. And I'm actually going to add one more. So just to refresh, if you need to add more data to your document, you can go right-click on Layers and go to Add Data. And then just navigate to the data that you want. I'm gonna add the bus stops. Okay, great. So now we have this all set up. So the first thing we're gonna do in preparing this data for its life as a map someday, as a two-dimensional flat map, is to actually change the coordinate system. So right now this data exists as a geographic coordinate system, which basically means that it's still sort of in a three-dimensional space. It's being wrapped around a globe. So it's actually, looking at it now on this two-dimensional screen, it's actually distorted. And so we want to project it onto a projected coordinate system so that we can more accurately see the distances and spatiality of this in a two-dimensional space. So in order to do that, we're just going to go to View, and then Data Frame Properties, and then we'll go to the Coordinate System tab, and we'll go down to these Projected Coordinate Systems. Okay, so now we have a number of options. Which one do we choose? This state plane option is typically the best one to do, especially if you're working in the US, because most municipalities, most cities that are putting their GIS data out there, they're working in the state plane system. And there's actually a map that you can go to, which I'll put a link to this in the video description. But you can actually go and look at where what state plane system zone your area of interest lies in. So a lot of states are split up in 2 or 3 zones, as you can see here. So we're going to go over to Virginia. We're working in Charlottesville, so we'll go to Albemarle County. And we see here that the zone name is Virginia South. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to want. So we'll go back to GIS. We'll choose the state plane option. We're going to choose US feet, because I think that's what we want to be working in. And then we'll go down to Virginia South and click on that and click OK. You might get this pop-up that says that some of your data, the coordinate system of some of your data will differ from this particular coordinate system that we're going to use. And that might happen. Sometimes data sets are created in a different coordinate system, but for the most part, as a collection of all the data that you're going to be getting, this is going to be the most accurate way of representing it. So we're just going to say yes to this. Okay, so now you can see that the map has been projected into a 2D space, so it more accurately reflects the distances in a two-dimensional space. It's no longer being wrapped around a sphere. So good, so we're all set there. So the first thing we're going to do with this data is we're going to do a little filtering. So I'm just going to look at the bike lanes in Charlottesville. And maybe I'm interested in the different types of bike lanes. Let me just shut that off. The different types of bike lanes in Charlottesville. If I was to open up this attribute table, right-click and then Open Attribute Table, we can see this is all the information that's sort of embedded into the shapefile that we have. So we can see here that within this data, we have speed limits for the roads where these bike lanes are. We have the types of bike lanes, where they are, the streets, a number of different things. So there are a number of different things that we can focus on in representing our data because of this. So let's say I'm interested in the type of bike lanes that we have. So let's right-click on this data set, and we're going to go to Properties, and then we're going to go to Symbology. And Symbology is just basically the way that the data is represented on the map. We'll go over here, and you can see there are a number of options. The first one is Features, which is just the plain and simple, everything looks exactly the same. This is how all data sets typically come in when you first add them to a map in GIS. But we're actually going to click on Categories, and we're going to go to this value field here, and we're going to search for lane type. So we'll click on lane type down here, and then we're going to add all the values in that. Okay, so you can see here that we now have 4 distinct lane types that have shown up. We have a bike lane, we have a climbing lane, a contraflow lane, which is where the bike and the car are going in opposite directions, and then sharrows, where the bikes and the cars are sharing the same space. We also have this all other values thing. So sometimes when you download data sets, you might get some features that don't have data for a particular category. There might be some unlabeled ones. Charlottesville looks like it did a pretty good job because there's no unlabeled categories, but sometimes you'll see that, and you'll have to decide whether or not to show those or not. But we're actually going to turn this off because it's irrelevant for us. So we've got these separated out. You can change this color ramp if you want to change the color of the categories, but these look pretty good, all distinct, and we'll click OK. Great. So now we have a color-coded version of the types of bike lanes that we have. Let's say I'm not interested in all these different types of bike lanes, though. Let's say I'm going to make a map where I'm just mapping the contraflow bike lanes. Maybe I have data on car crashes or something, and I want to see the amount of car crashes that are going on in this particular area where the bikes are going against the car traffic. So we're going to go back to Properties and back to Symbology, and we're just going to remove these other categories. And we're only going to focus on the contraflow bike lanes. We'll click OK. Great. So now we have those contraflow bike lanes shown. We can compare it with the roads that we have, and we can see where they are there. So that's one way of filtering data, which is by category. But another way that you might filter data is quantitatively. So some of the attributes of your data are going to come in as numbers, not categories, right? And so you may want to sort by numbers. So let's say we're looking at roads, and we want to look at the speed limits of different roads, and we want to map that out. So let's right-click on our roads, and we'll go to Properties and Symbology. And instead of going to categories, we're going to go to quantities. And we're going to go to the value field, and we'll look to see if we have a speed limit category right here. So we have a speed limit category, so we'll click on that. Okay, great. So it's automatically sorted the various speed limits of our roads into these 5 categories, which is lovely. You could change the amount of categories that you have. If I wanted to do 10, I could do 10 or 8 or whatever. But I think 5 is good for us. There's one thing I do want to change here. So this automatically put a category that was 0 to 5. There aren't typically that many 5 miles per hour speed zones. I think that would be pretty excruciating for a driver. So I mean, maybe they exist in Charlottesville. I don't know. But the slowest amount that we typically see is maybe a 15 mile per hour. So we're actually going to change this range of this particular category. So we're going to go up to Classify, and this will bring up this dialog box, which has a number of different ways that you can change the ranges of the numeric categories here. So if we go to Method, we can go to this drop-down, and we see all these different statistical techniques for breaking up data. You have standard deviation, quantiles, all these sorts of things. So it's really up to you. We're going to stick with natural breaks though. You can change the number of classes again, and then we can change the break values for these categories. And you can do that over here just by sliding this. You can see on the right it's changing, or we can just go over here and change it right away. So great. So the break value for that first category is now going to be raised to 15, which I think is a little bit more realistic for us. So we'll hit OK. And then we've got this nice color ramp that showed up from red to green, where red represents the slowest roads, and then green as a sort of green light represents the fastest roads. Maybe you want to show this differently though. Maybe you want to show the danger of high speeds. So maybe you want to actually flip this, maybe you want green to be safe and you want red to be fast and potentially dangerous. So that's up to you. But this is what I want for now to show my data, so I'm going to click OK. And great, so now we have this all sorted out. We can see we have a couple red zones where we have really low speed limits, and then we can see the highways where we have these high speed limits that go above 45. So those are two different ways of filtering data, by category and by quantity. The next thing we're going to look at is building relationships between two data sets, or exploring relationships between two data sets. So let's say, for instance, we want to look at access to public transportation in Charlottesville. So we want to look at the parcels that are in Charlottesville, and we want to see how far away from a bus stop they are. And then doing that, we can look at the areas that are far away, and we can see the people that live there and their economic status, and we can maybe start to think about the ways that public transit access affects other things in the city. So in order to set up these relationships, we're going to do what's called a join. So we're going to go to the parcel boundary layer here. We're going to right click on it, and we're going to go to joins and relates, and we're going to click join. So this dialog will come up. The first option here is how do you want to join this layer, or what you want to join. We can either join by the spatial location of another layer, or we can add attributes from a table, but we want the spatial location. And then we can choose the layer that we want to join. Bus stops is already chosen for us, but we could do any number of the data sets, or we could add a new one. So this recognizes that we're joining points to polygons. Our bus stops are points, and our parcels are polygons. With that, it gives us two different options for how we can join this data. The first one gathers all the attributes that fall inside of a parcel and gives us a count field. So we would be able to see how many bus stops exist in this particular area. But we actually want this second option. The second option sorts points by how close they are to a boundary, and then it will add a distance field to our data set so we can see how far away a particular point is from a parcel. And so that's the one that we actually want. So we'll click on that, and then we'll just click OK, and it's going to do some thinking. I'm going to get some coffee. Excuse me. Okay, great. So now we have this join. I'm going to put the bus stops above our new join so we can just see everything. We're going to rename. We'll just rename this for the sake of clarity. So it'll be parcel bus stop join. Great. Okay. So we did all this work, and this looks exactly the same as the parcels that we had before. That's because the symbology is all the same right now. But we actually have new data inside of this. So if we go back to the symbology, we can actually change how this looks. So if we go back to quantities, because we want the distance from a parcel, and we go to value, we can look for that new distance category that it said it was going to create, which it did right here. So we have distance. You might get this pop-up which says that the max sample size is reached. Not all records are going to be used. Typically this happens more when you have like a ton of categories of something. I'm just going to hit OK for now because I think we're going to be okay, but maybe check your data and see if that everything is showing up. So great. So now we have these 5 distinct categories of distances of bus stops, and it looks like the units must be in miles. That's probably the unit that the parcel boundary layer was in. So there are ways to change this. You could do feet or something, but I'm just going to stick with miles for right now. So yeah, this looks pretty good. The only thing I want to change, however, is I don't want red to mean the closest. I want green to mean the closest, because we're talking about access to public transportation, right? So green should be the closest, and then red should be the farthest. That should mean bad access to public transportation. So if we go up to symbol here and right-click, we can just flip our symbols. Great, so now green is the closest and red is the farthest. And we'll just hit OK. Great. So now we can see these red areas are the areas where you have to walk the farthest to get to a bus stop. They have the least access to public transportation. This area looks especially bad, so we could go in and we could look at who lives there, or what kind of business or what kind of residential situation is going on there, what kind of economic situations are there, and we could begin to think about these really smart relationships at an urban scale. So that's joining things through a quantity, but we can also join things sort of categorically or through their own overlaps. So let's turn this off, and we'll turn off the bus stops. Let's turn on our historic conservation areas. So let's say we're interested in what parcels of the city actually fall within these historic zones. So in order to dilute those out and to take those specific parcels that fall within here, we're going to do another join. So we're going to go to parcel boundary area, and we'll right-click again. And we'll go to joins and relates and join. This time we'll choose our historic district area. And so it recognizes this time we're joining polygons to polygons. And it gives us two options for that. The first one sorts things by whether or not they intersect a particular boundary. So let's say you're working at like a state line and you want to see which cities exist on a state border, for instance, like Kansas City, which has a Kansas side and a Missouri side. So that would be good for something like that. But we want to know which parcels fall completely inside of this historic district. So we're actually going to choose the second option, which sorts things by polygons that fall completely inside of another polygon. So we'll go ahead and click OK. It's going to do some more thinking. Go, 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 GIS, go. Great. Okay, so now we have this new output. We'll call it parcel historical join. Okay, so once again, this doesn't look like there's anything here, but we do have new information to look at. So we'll go to our Symbology, properties, Symbology. This time we'll go to categories, and we'll look over here, and we want the name of the historical area. That's the category that we're looking for. You may have to go back and reference the attributes table to find the category that you actually want to sort by. So we'll click on name, and we'll add these values, and you can see that we have these two specific conservation areas. We have the Martha Jefferson Historic Conservation Area and the Rugby Road. We also have these unnamed ones, so we're just going to remove those because they don't help us, and we'll uncheck all other values. That way we can really just see these two named areas. And they each have a different color, so we'll click OK. Okay, great. So now we can see that what we can see is we've got some of the parcels that exist, but it doesn't look like we got all of them, right? Like, we can see the purple underneath, which is the historic zone, and it seems like we didn't catch all the parcels that are underneath. And that happens sometimes when you do a join with polygons, where things might be exactly overlined or just a little bit off, and so you might not be able to catch everything that's actually inside of it. So there's actually a way of fixing this, and it's called a buffer. So what we're going to do, let's hide this layer. We're going to create a buffer for this historic conservation district. So we're actually going to take these two shapes and we're going to just expand them ever so slightly so that we make sure that we do get the parcels that are inside there. So we're going to go up to our handy Arc toolbox. And we're going to go to Analysis Tools, to Proximity, and to Buffer. And our input feature will be our historic areas. And then our size that we want to expand by, which is in feet, we'll just do 30. A positive quantity makes the polygon larger, but a negative quantity actually shrinks the polygon. So I think 30 feet will be good. That's reasonable enough to like get everything we need inside of it without getting any unwanted parcels in there. So we'll click OK. And it's going to do a little thinking. Just have to wait for a quick second for it to do its thing. Great. Okay. So now we have these historic districts, but they have a little buffer on them. If I was to actually pull up the old historic districts above here, and we zoom in, we can see the little buffer that was created. Nice. Okay, great. So we're going to try this join again, and hopefully we get all the parcels now that we've expanded the border just enough to actually collect everything. So let's go back to a parcel boundary, and excuse me, that's not what I wanted. And go to Joins and Relates, and we'll select our buffered historic conservation district, which we probably should have named better for clarity, but we'll just click it for now, and we'll go back to this option, this second option, about which sorts things by them falling completely inside of another polygon. So we'll click OK. And we'll do this one more time. Come on, little buddy. Okay, so now we have our new drawing. We'll go back to the Symbology and to our categories. We'll find the name of the historic district, and we'll add these values. Okay, great. And we'll once again remove these unnamed values and all these other values. That way we just get the two historic districts that are actually named. And we'll click OK. And boom. Okay, so now you can see we actually got all of the parcels that are inside of these historic districts. So that worked. So great. So yeah, that's a few ways of filtering data and of exploring relationships between data. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.